Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our panel discussion. I'm Yuning Wang, Associate Science Editor for Drug Discovery News, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. In this session, expert panels will discuss the technical and operational infrastructure in India that supports phase 1 through phase 3 trials, biostatistics, and integrated clinical to submission capabilities. We'll be looking at how India's clinical research ecosystem can support scalable clinical development while maintaining global quality standards. Before we begin, a quick reminder that we love to hear from you. You can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A box next to live stream player. We'll bring in audience questions throughout the session where possible. And with that, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Mrinal Kamla. Mrinal Kamla is a seasoned clinical scientist with more than 27 years of experience across healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and clinical research. As a medical doctor and American Heart Association certified intensivist, he transitioned into clinical research following senior residency training in cardiology. At Syngene, he leads translational and clinical research programs that bridge discovery and clinical execution with a focus on early to late phase development, clinical operations, and outcome-driven program leadership. And then we have Partha Chatterjee. Partha Chatterjee is the head of clinical trial at Syngene. He's a life sciences leader with more than 25 years of global experience in clinical operations. He provides strategic leadership for the design and execution of clinical trials across geographies, supporting efficient and scalable program delivery. As an alumni of the Institute of Science, Chatterjee has driven innovation across programs in India, the United States, and Europe, with expertise spanning global project management, clinical trial supply management, and biometrics. Next, we have Sidangota Patil. Sidangota Patil leads the Human Pharmacology Unit as well as medical and scientific writing at Syngene, with a focus on early phase clinical pharmacology. As a graduate of the Blaze Shri B.M. Patil Medical College and Hospital, he oversees phase 1 and early stage clinical studies, emphasizing participant safety and operational precision. Patil also directs medical and regulatory writing for global submissions, ensuring alignment with international standards and sponsor expectations. And then we have Kalavati Alango. Kalavati Alango is head of business strategy and process excellence for translational and clinical research at Syngene. As a medical doctor with a doctorate in clinical research, she brings in over 23 years of experience across early phase drug development, clinical research operations, and business strategy. She partners with global biopharma organizations to design and execute programs aligned with regulatory expectations. As a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, Alango leads cross-functional initiatives that integrate scientific rigor with operational efficiency to accelerate development and enable informed decision-making. And last but not least, we have Rajkumar Agarwal. Rajkumar Agarwal leads business development for the T&CR division and Syngene, where he is responsible for driving growth strategy and building strategic partnerships. He brings more than 15 years of experience across clinical research and drug development services, with a strong track record of expanding market presence, executing data-driven commercial strategies, and enable integrated service models. Agarwal combines scientific understanding with commercial leadership, holding a postdoctoral diploma in management and a bachelor's degree in pharmacy. So to kick off the discussion, over the last few years, India's position in global clinical development has clearly shifted. It's no longer viewed only through the lens of cost of capacity. So Mrinal, what do you see as the real factors that give India its edge today?
Thanks, Yuning. Thanks for the question and thanks for having us over. I guess it's going to be a pretty interesting conversation going forward. So, to address your question, the first one, the couple of things which I would like to highlight, and I think it's a combination of factors which has led to where India is today. If I have to categorize that broadly, it is on speed, scale, and the consistency of work which is being delivered. But then, if I have to deep dive a little bit further into it, there's a combination of factors. For example, the clinical infrastructure that has been built up over the last couple of years, the availability of talented manpower, the accessibility of principal investigators and clinicians who are now very, very eager to look at innovative clinical trials. I would also like to factor in the regulatory environment, which has improved dramatically, a vastly improved regulatory environment over the last decade, majorly through government initiatives. The government themselves are deeply involved in improving the clinical infrastructure. So these are a combination of factors which has led to where India is today and where we aspire to be in the next decade or so. I will predominantly like to also point out that one of the major factors which has led to this is the availability of the treatment naive patient pool in India, coupled with the infrastructure. I guess these are the couple of factors which have led to where India is today.
Thank you. That's a really helpful overview of India's position today. And building on that foundation, I like to look at how sponsors actually engage across the value chain in practice. So the next thing I wanted to discuss is that sponsors today want more than execution. They want partners who can span the life cycle. And how does Syngene partner across the drug development value chain? Raj, would you like to take that?
Thanks, Yunan. Thanks for this query. In fact, it's an important conjuncture at this point of time where customers also want the CRs to be their partners during the whole drug development cycle. And Syngene has evolved from a traditional CRO into a fully integrated CRDMO partner, playing a extremely critical role for the whole drug development value chain. One of the strongest differentiation which lies from Syngene in the whole value chain is in fact in its translational clinical research platform, which in fact bridges the discovery and the clinical development through data-driven, patient-centric approaches. And by combining the scientific depth that we have as a company, operational scale, digital capabilities, and flexible engagement models, we are able to reduce the development risk, accelerate the timelines, and improve the clinical success rate, which is one of the biggest factor or one of the biggest lacuna at this point of time within the whole drug development cycle with the amount of molecules which are able to move forward. And in this model is built actually to act as a strategic extension of the client R&D organizations, enabling pharmaceutical and biotech companies to accelerate innovation while they are able to optimize the cost, timelines, and the risk. When I look at Syngene's role across the whole drug development value chain, right from the discovery and early research, at the earliest stage, Syngene supports the target identification, validation, head to lead and lead prioritization, discovery biology and chemistry, along with the preclinical services that we are able to offer. By having its integrated research services, which combine chemistry, biology, computational sciences, and safety assessment, through which we are able to generate a lot of drug candidates. Additionally, we have an internal model of having dedicated R&D centers, which allow for long-term partnerships where Syngene functions as a fully embedded research arm for the clients, offering the scalability and continuity. Also, when we look at the value chain, the transition from discovery to clinical development is often the highest risk phase. Syngene's translational capabilities, along with the preclinical capabilities, helps to bridge this gap. And how do we do it? We do it by translating the preclinical findings into clinical, conducting PKPD modeling, developing biomarkers and companion diagnostics, and leveraging pharmacogenomics and computational data. The integrated approach helps us by de-risking the candidate selection, improving the probability of clinical success. Syngene has strategically evolved its clinical development services into translational clinical research, reflecting the industry shift towards the data-driven precision medicine development. The translation sciences integration, as we move forward, my colleague Dr. Kalavati would be getting into a little more depth. I'll give you an overview just from a value chain perspective. The TNCR unit over here integrates the biological sciences, biomarker discovery, pharmacogenomics, and predictive modeling. Within the biological and laboratory space, we are able to do the bioanalysis for the small and the large molecules along with the biomarkers, immunogenicity and biomarker testing, therapeutic drug monitoring, and the PK studies. In the central lab, we provide multi-therapeutic clinical trials with high-quality data integrity, enabling us to provide seamless sample management, faster turnaround times, and regulatory compliant data generation. The clinical operations that we have are spread across the country, provided and supported by the central labs, image vendors, EDC digital platform, logistics and cold chain partners, as well as the regulatory and medical writing team. All the above areas which I've listed make Syngene an extremely valued partner during the whole drug development life cycle. Over to you, Anand.
Great. Thanks, Raj. That's a very clear picture of how those partnerships work in practice. So to understand this in more detail, I'd like to talk about the operational side and look at how this actually structured across different parts of the clinical trial process. And Dr. Kalavathi, maybe you can tell us where Syngene fits into the clinical trial value chain and how this ecosystem functions in practice.
Thanks, Unique. The drug development today is not limited by innovation. It is limited by how effectively the early scientific promise is translated into the clinical and regulatory success. And as Raj mentioned, Syngene uniquely integrates the preclinical, translational, and the clinical capabilities under one ecosystem, from generating the robust preclinical evidence to translating that science through biomarkers into the first in human studies and the proof of concept studies, and running the late phase clinical trials with regulatory rigor. We enable a seamless journey from bench to bedside. And at the core of this model is the translation services team, which links the bench to the bed, integrating the biomarker strategy, validation, and interpretation. And so complementing this is our clinical operations who run the clinical trials. Before entering into the clinic, the medical writing team pitches in. They develop the high quality protocols, informed consent documents, and the dossiers for ethics committee and regulatory submissions. And there comes the role of the regulatory team. They liaise with our regulatory agencies. They remain in constant engagement with the regulatory agencies and then ensure timely and seamless approval of the regulatory documents. When it comes to the clinic, we offer dual capability. The early phase clinical trials in the healthy volunteers under a tightly controlled environment, which provides high quality data with speed. And for this, we have a dedicated 190 bed capacity here in our translational clinical research division under the same roof, as well as the rich volunteer database to cater to this early phase clinical trials in healthy volunteers. And we do deliver the patient-based clinical trials in the hospital settings. And for that purpose, we have tied up with more than 200 hospital sites and more than 600 investigators. And more importantly, we have established partnerships with the global CROs. So this ecosystem helps the sponsors to do the global trials both in the early phase as well as the late phase with access to diverse patient population across geographies. And as Raj said, we do have a central lab who do the safety sample analysis and then ensure reliable and consistent results across the sites. And alongside our clinical conduct, if you see, we have a bioanalytical services where they deliver the assays for the assessment of pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, immunogenicity for small molecules, as well as for the large molecules, including the ADCs, peptides, biosimilars, and vaccines in a regulated environment. And when it comes to the clinical conduct, our pharmacovigilance team ensures the adverse events are monitored and then they ensure the safety. And our medical monitoring team ensures continuous monitoring to ensure patient safety and data quality. And then comes the support functions like the data management, statistics team, and the medical rating team in supporting the deliverable of the continuous end-to-end report submission in compliance with the regulatory standards. This data management team, they ensure that the data captured in the EDC are cleaned, validated, and transcribed in alignment with the STDM standards. And the statistics team transfer these STDM standards into ADAM compliant analytical data sets. And they prepare the tables, listings, and figures, while the medical writing team incorporate all these reports into CDISC structure, ensuring consistencies across the report, and they also facilitate efficient regulatory review. And overseeing all these functions is our quality team who ensure compliance and keep us inspection ready. And supporting all our functions is a dedicated project management team. They are the center of point of coordination. They ensure timely submission of the deliverables as well as ensure seamless communication flow between the sponsors and the study teams. So what differentiates Syngene is not only the breadth of the services, but also a flexibility. We can also offer end-to-end integrated services or a standalone services for all these service offerings. So Syngene is no longer an offshore CRO, but a strategic R&D partner with unmatched flexibility and confidence. So hence the ecosystem in practice, it works each with each team playing its role.
Great. That's a really useful breakdown, and it sounds like a very comprehensive and coordinated ecosystem. And now let's get a little bit deeper into the science side, particular early development and how translational research supports decision making, because early development is where most drugs programs fail. So how do translational research and the biomarkers strengthen first in human and early phase trials?
It's a very interesting question. The first in human trials represent a very critical translational milestone, a point at which the preclinical science must prove its relevance in humans. And this is crucial. You know, the odds are challenging. Only 1 in 10,000 compounds that enter the preclinical research enter the market, and 90% of this fail during the clinical development phase. And this is because of the poor translation of the pharmacokinetic, efficacy, and toxicity data from animals to humans.
Okay.
So here comes the role of a translational services team who integrate the pharmacology, toxicology, PKPD, and the biomarker strategy and ensure that the scientific learning from the preclinical research is meaningfully converted or translated into the clinical part. And for this, biomarkers are central to our strategy. And this translation service with the biomarker strategy, they lay the foundation for the FIH trials. Though safety and tolerability remain the primary endpoints for the FIH studies, biomarkers confirm the target engagement. They identify early signals of the biological activity. They enable the dose escalation or dose selection. So this translational team, along with the biomarker strategy, they provide high quality biomarker insights to the sponsors, enabling dose selection, dose escalation, and an informed go or no go decision. And that is why large biopharma partner with Syngene.
Thank you. That's a clear explanation of how biomarkers support early development. And building on that, I like to turn to the regulatory side and how the framework in India supports this kind of development in a more predictable way. Maybe Partha, so India's regulatory environment has changed significantly since 2019. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the changes and how these changes in reform improved predictability for global sponsors.
Sure. Sure. Thank you for the question, and it's a very valid point here to be noted. And as Mrinal touched upon, there is a new rules which was introduced in 2019, and there was a paradigm shift with the focus is on a structured, rule-driven approval framework across early and late phase trials. And what it brought in for the regulatory environment is that there is a formalized role of the Indian regulators as well as the subject expert committee, who now has a very defined role on how the regulatory dossiers to be reviewed. And then there is a consistent linkage between the Indian regulators and the ethics committee's oversight, because ethics committee in India also needs to look at the protocol and provide an approval, and then only the trial can start, apart from the regulatory approval. So both need to be consistent, and then there is no duplicacy in or uncertainty between the two bodies. So that was very clearly defined. And over the period of time, in 2026, what they have introduced is also the amendment to the regulatory framework, wherein they are bringing in more uh, uh, prior intimation pathways, where you can actually go and talk to the regulators, seek for their guidance before actually applying for the regulatory approval. And this gives the sponsors much more clarity on what the regulators would think when they actually deliberate their protocol. Similarly, having a very statutory timelines, some of the key areas like test license to be approved within 90 days, that has been brought back to almost 45 days, which is a good time saving thing which has happened. So this kind of turnaround time for certain activities within the regulatory framework has brought in a lot of expectations back from the global sponsors as well as the local sponsors, that yes, the regulators also are really caring to ensure that more and more trials can get approval if all the data is submitted is as per their expectation. That confidence is coming back, and we have seen a lot of traction in recent years of the global sponsors coming back to India to do their global clinical trials as well.
Great, that's very helpful context, and it's really good to know. And now I'd like to turn to another area sponsors care deeply about speed, which is speed, and how India is able to consistently accelerate enrollment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Correct. So once the regulatory hurdle is over, the next big headache for the sponsor is the recruitment to be as per their expected timelines. And that's where India plays a critical role. And it is certainly now getting positioned for the global clinical development programs. And with the predictable regulatory framework, now they are trying to get that hurdle sorted, and then coming next is whether to consider India as one of the destination for the clinical trial. As over the past several years, we know that there is no dearth in the patient pool, as well as no dearth in the disease profile in India. But what is more interesting to know is that the treatment naive population is much, much higher than any other geographies in the world. And that is something you take any therapeutic areas, be it oncology, metabolic disease, or an infectious disease, or an inflammatory disorder, you will find a lot of treatment naive population as well. And that is required for the early phase development as well as the late phase development for many of the sponsors. So that's one added advantage over and above the disease profile we have in India. Secondly, the landscape of the sites. What we had started in a very nascent phase in early 2000 has now matured into a lot of sites which are GCP compliant, which are compliant to ICH E6 R3 compliance, where they are looking at more of risk profile before taking up the trial. Rapid site activation can happen at a larger scale. Parallel recruitment across multiple cities can also happen. And then obviously the sites are putting their best effort to also deliver on the other aspects, that is the data quality is up to the global standard or not. With all this, there is already a very strong headwind for a good global clinical trial ecosystem within India nowadays. And if we have a globally harmonized protocol, and you select the right sites, you are going to achieve more predictable recruitment or enrollment in if you consider India as one of the countries. So yes, that's a big plus point. What has happened over last few years.
Sounds great. That sounds impressive. And I think another thing that global sponsors care about is the alignment with US and EU frameworks. And what does that look like?
Correct. So what our Indian regulatory framework has done is they have aligned with US FDA, EMEA, and other geographies, and they have aligned in terms of ICH framework. They are accepting CTD format for reporting. They are also having alignment of, as I mentioned, E6 R3, R2 guidelines, and that brings much more, much more clarity in what the final outcome of that trial will be. And basically, our regulatories also are approving or asking for whether the trials are also reviewed by the other geographies, other regulators or not, like US FDA, EMEA, MHRA, and which is also something as a global reliance principle, which is endorsed by WHO. That if there is a concerted effort amongst all the regulators about doing a similar standard trial, then your data is likely to be accepted world over after the trial is over. So that's exactly where that robustness is coming from.
Great. Thanks for elaborating on that. And now let's look at how the speed is being balanced with data quality and increase in digitalization in trials. Dr. Patil, over the past decade, Indian CROs and clinical sites have seen increasing scrutiny from global regulators such as ICH, FDA, and EMA. So what do you think? Can you tell us your perspective on this?
Yes. So hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So yes, you're absolutely right. So regulatory scrutiny is at its highest level today, and the response cannot be just inspection-driven compliance alone. So there must be a fundamental shift towards quality by design, what we say QBD, which is no more a buzzword now. So where quality is directly built into the protocols and process, and right from the start. I think over the last decade, most of the Indian CROs and trial sites have clearly grown up now. So, along with ticking those compliance boxes, we are also designing quality into studies. So, nowadays, protocols are built with risk based study design because no one enjoys surprises halfway through a trial. So, some of the key safety endpoints and critical data points are clearly called out upfront. So, what we are also noticing is a better cross functional involvement. So, experts such as pharmacologists, clinicians, statisticians, so they are all contributing to the protocol design. So, along with quality by design, another important thing is using digital tools. So these are central to how clinical trials are executed globally. So at Syngene, initiatives like electronic source is helping reduce all human errors. And also the real-time data review is happening. So this application also integrates the lab and clinical systems so that there is a seamless data flow across operational platforms. So, well, such digitalization is not only restricted to CROs or hospitals, they are now extended to decentralized clinical trial models. So, data is now being captured in a real time basis using devices, wearables, and by patients themselves. So, with these patient friendly tools like ePros and continuous vitals monitoring devices, participant can simply report symptoms and outcomes from their own devices. So, no hospital visits, no paperwork, and no memory challenges. So, investigators are getting faster visibility of patient safety. So, interventions happen on time. So, before a small signals turn into big problems. So, when we put this quality by design and digital tools together, the trial executions genuinely become smoother and more predictable also. And honestly, it's exactly what regulators are looking for. Yes, Yin.
It's interesting. And it's good to know that quality today is designed directly within the process rather than inspected at the end. Building on that, I'd like to explore some of the challenges that come with increasing complex early phase studies. So as first in human and complex early phase trials become more high risk and operational demanding, what strategies are critical to effectively deliver these studies successfully?
Yes, so we are dealing with a different level of complexity here. So these are first-in-class mechanisms. We haven't seen this before. And the molecules themselves have very tight safety margins. So first-in-human protocols are also frankly very heavy on the execution standpoint. So there will be intense safety monitoring, very dense PK sampling we have to do, and even multiple biomarker assessments. So given this complexity, it's difficult for a single site to manage all aspects of this trial effectively. So these studies demand two very different strengths at the same time. On one hand, exceptional operational control is required, and on the other hand, deep clinical and medical capability. So this is where purposeful collaboration between phase 1 CROs and hospital sites become very essential for a trial success.
Thanks. That highlights some important challenges. And stepping back from the specifics, I like to look at the broader direction things are the broader direction things are heading and how India's role in global clinical development is evolving overall. So we have discussed science, quality, regulation, and speed. So Mernal, maybe you can tell us how you see India evolving from an execution hub to a true innovation partner for global pharma. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. Good question, Yuning, and very happy to answer that. I guess most of the answers have been very well provided by my colleagues. I think the way they have detailed the various factors and the various things which go into clinical development, especially in innovation, is noteworthy. Having said that, and just to give you a preamble, I think India in context was always known more for the generic development which used to happen. We used to be known as the pharmacy of the world, but predominantly on the generic side. But innovation today is what India is known for, and that's purely because of all the factors which my colleagues outlined. For example, the translational science, the improving regulations, the various quality by design which is coming into all these trials. These are factors which are now being blended. Traditionally, what used to happen, all these activities used to be siloed. The entire clinical research used to be more fragmented. But today, it is a very well-known fact that only companies which can successfully blend all these factors into a single unified process flow, those are the companies which will succeed and which sponsors look for. And here I do want to take this opportunity to mention that Syngene now is ideally poised, considering the fact that we have teams who are domain experts in discovery, we have teams who are domain expert in biology, in development, in translational science, and in clinical research. So our mantra has been to blend everything together, come out with a real innovative package which looks attractive to clients, and bring in the real innovation in science rather than extrapolating data without any unified workflow. That, I think, is the crux on where companies will survive and companies will get successful in the coming times.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks, Mernal. And thank you to all the panelists. So we have covered a lot of ground from India's strategic role and early phase capability to integration, quality, and regulation. So now we have some great questions coming from the audience. Let's move to a few of them now. So the first question we got is, when clinical data comes from multiple regions and vendors, what are the biggest challenges in aligning India data to SDTM and ADAM for FDA submissions? Does anyone want to take that question?
Yeah, Yuning, let me take up this.
Mhm.
So these challenges are really not technical. They are organizational with the multiple vendors, inconsistent practices, and regional differences. For example, if you take one CRO may record the lab values in milligrams per deciliter, while another may record the value in millimoles per liter. Or you can take another example, safety narratives are maybe drafted from the preliminary listings, while the statistical team may update the outputs later. So these mismatches will create the inconsistencies between the datasets, statistical outputs, and the clinical study reports. The solution here lies in integration and discipline. Discipline in terms of structured formats, I should say. So the integration should lie between the data management team, statistical team, and the medical writing team to deliver a end-to-end submission report in compliance with the harmonized standards. So if you see in Syngene, we use the CD standards for creation of the STTM and ADAM datasets by SAS, and they are validated by Pinnacle. And the enforcement should be on usage of the structured, standardized, study-specific templates. So in order to avoid the costly delays or to ensure the smooth FDA submission, we should invest in harmonized platforms, give proper training, and then governance, and then automation. So if all these are followed, I don't think it will be a challenge.
Great, thank you. And it's good to know that standards should be aligned early. And the next question, how does combining a phase 1 unit like Syngene with tertiary hospitals create a stronger execution model than working independently?
Yeah, Yuning, I will take that question.
Yep.
So as I said earlier, the real strength of this model is both sides complementing each other. So Syngene brings deep early phase expertise with strong operational control and very disciplined execution also. So what we do is we extend this to the hospital by harmonizing the procedures. We prepare site manuals and also do focus training. So everyone is working the same way. So most importantly, Syngene also maintains a direct oversight of these clinical trials through deployed field CRS. So they ensure the trial is running properly with a continuous monitoring. So at the same time, so when we are talking about the Syngene side, our hospital partners also add very clinical depth to these studies. So they have specialist physicians and access to right patient population also. And also the infrastructure is also suited to manage high risk safety situations. So together this approach allows us to run studies very efficiently.
Sounds good. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
The next question, from a sponsor's perspective, where does using multiple specialist vendors most often create risk or delay?
Let me take this one. I guess being closer to the customer, this is something that we keep hearing, keep having a challenge when we have our communication with a lot of sponsors also. Actually, from a sponsor's perspective, when you look at the current situation, using multiple specialist vendors often introduces the risk in multiple activities of the whole clinical trial itself, right from the study startup, the data integration, and the change management. And the sponsors frequently face delays due to multiple contracts, misaligned timelines, and the fragmented data systems. This may actually cause delays in the startup activities. Then you have the communication complexity associated by having communication with multiple sponsors, the change management delays, and the most important is the site and the patient experience risk because of having to work with multiple vendors. Over there, as a single partner, even though if we are working with multiple players, Syngene would be able to navigate the contracts from a timelines, be able to communicate at the right time. The accountability gaps when you're working with multiple vendors can actually slow the decision making. An integrated provider would actually provide us a single governance model, end-to-end accountability, which reduces your operational risk and accelerates the execution of the study. So these are some of the challenges which the customers face, and by working with an integrated provider, they would be able to overcome the challenges listed above. Over to you, Yunan.
Great, that's a really good point. Thank you. The next question. In the final weeks before submission, how do teams practically avoid inconsistencies between safety narratives, statistical outputs, and the clinical study report?
Again, let me take up unit. As
Yep.
I mentioned earlier, there should be a close integrated work happening between the medical writing team, data management, statistical, and the programming team to ensure that a regulatory requirement complaint report is prepared. So all this will happen when the teams have a structured format of data capture, structured format of cleaning the data, and then analysis, and then these outputs are integrated in the CT standards.
Awesome. Thank you. And now we have time for one last question. For sponsors reassessing their China strategy, what are the most meaningful differences today when comparing India and China for early clinical development and FDA-facing programs? Does
Let
anyone?
me take that, Yuling, and
Yep.
interesting question once more. I guess there are many, many factors, and we do admit China did take a giant leap towards clinical research in the previous decade or so. And like I said, it was multifactorial. The regulatory environment was not conducive. There were a couple of other factors which led to China taking a lead. But having said that, India today, and I reiterate what I tried to outline during the earlier part of our conversation, India today is ideally poised to take that leap, and especially for sponsors who are looking for a China plus one strategy. I don't think there is any other country in the world today which stands to what India has to offer. And I say that very confidently because of the reasons which I outlined earlier as well. I guess just looking at the sheer size of our population, the availability of treatment naive patients, but over and above, beyond that, I think it's the integration of science which has really come into play into India. Like we discussed, the blending of the various innovation happening across discovery, development, and manufacturing, and specifically into clinical research. One important aspect which I think India will stand to gain advantage is the large proportion of patients, large proportion of scientific talent, and an equally large proportion of investigators who are very English savvy. The medium of instruction is in English. It becomes a little more convenient for sponsors, especially arising from the West, to communicate much more easily with English speaking population, native English speaking populations rather than Chinese. So that's one area where we stand a distinct advantage. The second biggest area where I see India stands to gain a lot of advantages is the incorporation of artificial intelligence into clinical research. That's an area which is evolving, and I can confidently say that India is taking the right steps and taking giant leaps in terms of AI. And like what my colleagues outlined earlier during the discussion, the introduction of digitization and automation doesn't only help in reducing the speed or doesn't only help in enhancing productivity or timelines, but it's also the scientific focus which is brought into. So that's an area where India is investing quite a bit in terms of bringing in artificial intelligence into the clinical research spectrum. And then all the other factors which my colleagues rightly outlined very much in detail earlier. The infrastructure, the acceptability of data arising from India. I think that's another big factor which is coming into play because the Indian population is considered to be very homogeneous to the Caucasian population. And that data is widely accepted by US and EU. They look for data coming in from homogenized populations. So that's another distinct advantage which India needs to play on. And it's very evident now. If you look at the trend over the last decade or so, the number of approvals received from trials predominantly carried out in India has been steadily increasing year on year. Not just to the US FDA, but all the major regulatory bodies like the UK MHRA, the European authorities. Almost every major regulatory body across the world has started to look at meaningful data coming in from India and have started approving. There are a lot of marketing approvals which have come over the last decade from trials which have been carried out in India. So if we have to look at an amalgamation of everything that we discussed just now, I guess India is ideally poised, and sponsors do have India as a very, very good alternative compared to China.
Great. That's really good to know. Thanks for sharing that, Murnau. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have available for today. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their expertise and perspective. It's been a valuable discussion. The webinar will now be available on demand, and you can access the recording using the same link you used today. A certificate of attendance will also be sent via email to everyone who attended today's session. We'll also make sure any questions submitted on demand and will be passed along to the panelists. Before we go, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to our panelists again for their time and insights, and to everyone in the audience for joining us and engaging today. We hope to see you again soon.